How's it going, Star Seekers? My name's Luke, and welcome back once again to the channel and to another SOS indie game review. Today we're going to be taking a look at a cheeky little action platformer title called Bladed Fury. The game is set in ancient China, and you take on the role of Ji Jiang, a princess who, after being exiled for allegedly murdering her father, is on a quest for vengeance as she vows to track down the people responsible for her father's death, seeking both answers and justice in the process. With a fast-paced, skill-based combat system and uniquely stylised visuals which put a modern-day spin on the traditional Chinese art style, the game both looks great and promises to offer some fantastic action-packed levels and boss encounters. But how does it hold up on the Nintendo Switch, a console which performs notoriously badly when it comes to handling ports featuring anything other than 8 and 16-bit visuals? In this review I aim to answer those questions, so brush up on your Mandarin, pour yourself some green tea, and let's get into it. So Bladed Fury opens with a cutscene introducing us to the game's main protagonist and her sister Shu, and in this first section we get to play through the events which led up to the death of her father and her fleeing from the palace. Now, controls in the game are pretty straightforward, and if you played other action platformers with melee-based combat systems such as Guacamelee or something like Dead Cells, then you should be able to get to grips with them quite quickly. In Bladed Fury, we're armed with two different weapons, the first of these being the Twin Blades Fiendbane, which allow you to perform fast but light combos with taps of the Y button, and the second being the two-handed beast of a sword that is the Crimson Mass, a weapon gifted to you by the mythological Chinese god of archery, Hu Yi, which allows you to dish out slow but powerful blows and deflect projectiles back at enemies by hitting the X button. Learning how to string together attacks using these two weapons is pretty important when it comes to taking on the game's plethora of bad guys, though things are kept pretty simple so you don't have to memorise a ton of different button combinations. Now, you're also going to have to master your defensive manoeuvres, especially if you want to survive those tough boss fights. We get a standard dash manoeuvre which can be performed both on the ground and in the air, and this provides us with a few iframes and is used both in combat and outside of it to extend your jump distance when platforming. Our second defensive ability comes in the form of a shield, which can be used to block and reduce the damage taken from standard enemy attacks, but it can be broken by heavier piercing strikes. Timing your block as an enemy is about to hit you will result in a parry, opening up enemies for a counter attack, which is especially useful against armoured enemies identified by a yellow bar below the red health bar. Each weapon has its own unique counter attacks which are useful in different situations. Now, each defeated enemy will see you obtaining a quantity of souls, which, much like in the Devil May Cry games, can be used to unlock new skills or upgrade existing ones. Each weapon gets its own set of abilities, with a third set containing a few different character upgrades, including improvements to your dash, shield and rejuvenation charges, which can be activated to recover some health. While there isn't a huge number of these skills to unlock in comparison to some action platformers, each one of them feels meaningful and has a significant impact on gameplay. Out of all of the skills though, I would highly recommend unlocking the sidestep ability first, as it allows you dodges and blocks to cancel out of combo attacks, which is essential in most of the boss fights. So, following a short combat tutorial, we make our way to the palace's throne room, within which sits our father, who for some reason has become gravely ill. After speaking with him, a plume of black smoke bursts from his body, forming into the shape of a hideous hulking demon-like creature, and thus ensues the game's first boss battle. Now, I thought the bosses in the game were all very well done. Each has its own unique set of moves for you to memorise, lest you be punished if you fail to avoid them, and bosses have a health bar with multiple layers, creating phased fights where the movesets change, becoming more complex each time a layer of health is removed. While these boss encounters are fairly challenging and you'll likely die a fair few times before you manage to take them down, we're not talking Dark Souls levels of difficulty here, and good defensive manoeuvres will see you getting through these battles without too many issues. Now after beating a boss, not only will you be rewarded with a nice chunk of souls to spend on upgrades, you can also capture a sliver of their soul, and these soul slivers grant you special abilities which can be activated to heal yourself, deal massive damage to enemies or slow them to a crawl. There is however a short cooldown between activations, and each soul has a limited number of charges available, though like your health and rejuvenation charges, these can be replenished at lantern checkpoints. Now, Bladed Fury's narrative takes you through several different locations, each with their own unique environments, which are all visually stunning in their own right. These include things like a battlefield which slowly transitions between the living world and the realm of the dead, a towering rooftop level featuring lots of platforming as you ascend towards its highest tower, and a castle level whose dungeons contain a ton of deadly traps requiring some skillful movement to get through unscathed. Personally, I was quite glad to see that the platforming elements of the game only played a minor part, and that Bladed Fury focuses more heavily on the combat side of things, as it kept the game at a steady pace without too much downtime between the action. Now, unlike some action platformers where levels take place on a single side-scrolling map, levels in Bladed Fury are essentially made up of rooms which kind of act like mini arenas containing sets of enemies which you need to defeat before you can progress onwards. Each of the game's levels introduces its own unique types of enemies, ranging from simple foot soldiers armed with swords, spears and shields, to creatures based on Chinese mythology like the headless Xing Tian, and I thought there was some good variety to the game's enemies, with each foe presenting their own challenge and requiring slightly different strategies to defeat them. Sometimes you can get away with just mashing your way through encounters, knocking up enemies into the air and juggling them with combo moves, but others require you to be a bit more cautious, utilising counter attacks to shred their armour before laying into them with a solid 1-2 combo. So in all, Bladed Fury will likely take you around 6 to 10 hours to complete on normal mode, after which you can take on hard mode, or try your hand at the game's challenge mode, which is essentially a boss rush where you have to defeat all of the game's bosses one after another as fast as you can. Overall, I had a great time playing through Bladed Fury. It's got some solid platforming, a fluid combat system, and an interesting story which actually includes some elements taken from ancient Chinese history. While I would say its gameplay mechanics don't do a huge amount to distinguish Bladed Fury from other action platformers, I still thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, however it does suffer from a few minor issues. Now firstly, I'll start by saying that considering the game has been ported from PC to Switch, it's still retained a high level of quality with its visuals, and I was surprised to find that its frame rate is actually quite solid, bar some slight hiccups on the odd occasion where too many enemies are on the screen at once. Despite the stable frame rate though, the game does suffer from some strange gameplay stutters, which seem to occur when enemies or bosses perform certain attacks, or you perform blocks and dodges. On more than one occasion these screen freezes led to my death, and they were the source of most of my frustration when playing the game. The second issue, which may be tied to the first, is the game's hitboxes, which can be a bit temperamental at times, as blocks fail to activate on the odd occasion and enemies sometimes hit you despite them not even facing your direction. My final issue with the game is the fact that I experienced several crashes throughout my time playing, with 90% of these occurring just before boss battles were about to load in. Luckily, most boss battles have a checkpoint just before them, so it's not a huge issue getting back into the fights, but having to restart the game is still pretty annoying, so hopefully a day one patch will fix this issue when the game releases. Now apart from the above mentioned issues, I thought Bladed Fury was a very good action platformer. It has some fantastic visuals in both the character sprites and the environmental artwork, and the audio is also on point, with some great sound effects and battle music with a traditional Chinese vibe to it. Character cutscenes are also fully voiced in a Chinese dialect, which I felt added immersion to the game's storyline, though I'm sure there'll be one or two people out there reluctantly reading those subtitles. Now when it comes to my own personal rating of the game, I'm going to be giving Bladed Fury 4 out of 5 stars. If you like your action platformers with a tasty layer of melee based combat and a side salad of challenging boss fights, then Bladed Fury might just be the game to order, and hopefully a day one patch can fix those niggly game stutters and crashes. Bladed Fury releases on the 25th of March, and you can pick it up from the UK Switch eShop, where it's usually priced at £15.29, or from the US eShop, where it's usually priced at $19.99. Alternatively, the game's also coming to Xbox and PlayStation, and it's already available on Steam. And that about wraps up this review of Bladed Fury on the Nintendo Switch. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed it and it helped you out. Let me know your thoughts on the game and the review in the comments section below, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel as I upload new Nintendo Switch reviews and content every couple of days. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.